And as I mentioned a moment ago that it's good to have people's phones on mute, that doesn't mean that I don't want you to ask questions. In fact, I'd like to encourage you to ask any questions that you have. You're welcome to take yourself off mute to ask questions. It's just that when we have a lot of people on the call, it tends to get a little loud with the background noise. But please do ask questions. If you're feeling a little shy, you're also welcome to ask your question in the chat window, which is nice because that way I can just read it out loud and your voice won't be recorded. A couple of other things to mention here. One of them is that as you are looking at the environment that I'm doing my demos in, it's going to look very different from yours. If that's the case, don't worry. Everybody's CPQ environment is very customized, except for mine. Mine is pretty much an out-of-the-box environment. Here, I'm going to go ahead and put you on mute too. All right, I think we're good. Everybody else's is customized except for mine. Mine is really a very much an out-of-the-box environment. So if you see any differences, don't worry. That's really probably all that's happening. I'll mention at the end that we have a job aid, which is just a downloadable PDF summary of the content of the class that you'll be able to download from Callidus Cloud University. And as I mentioned earlier, the session is being recorded. We post the recordings of the classes within 24 hours to the instant replay section of Callidus Cloud University, so you'll be able to find it there. Up until then, you'll find last month's recording of the same class. All right, so what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we have a nice, really deep dive focus that we're going to be dealing with, which is getting data into CPQ using imports from Excel. We will talk a little bit about exporting, but it's very, very straightforward. So I'll talk to you. What I'll do is I'm going to go through a couple of different types of importing. So we'll talk about the templates, and I will show you how the importing and exporting options differ for three generally different types of data. User data, people data, right? Companies, customers, and users, attributes, and products. And you'll also notice on those three bullets that we talk about attribute translations and product translations, which I'm actually going to do together. It's a really, really nice feature if you need to localize your catalog. And then we'll finish up with how to do a bulk import, which is a very nice feature. Right now, it only works for products and users. It's a nice, a little bit easier way to do an import. And then we'll finish up with one more chance for Q&A, and we'll talk about resources that you can use after class. But again, don't forget, you don't have to wait till the end for Q&A. You can jump in and ask questions whenever you'd like. But first, I have a question for you, which is, since this is the first of the CU Live sessions in our sort of little continuum, my question for you is whether who here has been through the CPQ e-learning course that we have on Callidus Cloud University. Now, if you haven't, don't worry. I just want to get an idea of where we are, so you can put one of a couple of answers. No, I didn't even know you had it, or maybe no, I will, but wanted to take this class first, or I started it but I haven't finished it, or yes, I'm done. Okay, so we have one answer already. It's been a while, been more than a year. That's all right. We haven't changed it. Let's see, what else are we going to be looking at here? Let's see, give everybody a chance to give an answer there. So like I said, if you okay, have one that said started but haven't finished it yet. Okay, that's fine. Now let's see what else we have. We have a quiet class today, don't we? Okay, that's all right. Okay, we have another one, started but not yet finished. Okay, and go ahead and keep your answers coming as we go through here. And okay, we have another one, started but not yet finished. So the reason I ask this is that we're assuming that you know what we're talking about when we talk about users and companies and customers and products and attributes and so on. There we've got one who's completed it. Good job. So if you are wondering what I mean by an attribute or a product, what I would do is go ahead and sit through this, see what things look like, go through and just finish the intro class, which is the one that covers everything we're going to talk about here. And then you can come back and watch the recording and it'll kind of put everything back together. But I think everybody here is probably okay. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is templates. And the reason templates are important here is that when you are importing data, you first start by creating a template that shows you what the format of the data should be in. And a template is just an Excel spreadsheet with the fields in a certain order. And there are a number of different templates. Generally, you create a template by going to whichever workspace you want to import data into and find the template there. So basically, they're just predefined templates to import data. It says here that you can create a template by exporting existing data, but there is a difference. If you're just doing a data export, you're not really creating a template because the data actually does come out in a little bit different format. So I will show you this. There is a difference between doing an export and creating a template. Okay, and each template has a tab that gives you all the guidelines, kind of tells you what you need to do and that type of thing. So let's jump into our first example, which is data about people. And by that, I mean companies, customers, and users. So we generally import companies first because every user has to be assigned to a company. Even if they really don't have a company, you could create sort of a dummy company called individual user or individual or something like that. So because of that, you have this dependency going on. So we generally would say before you import your users, which have a company field, import the companies first and just make sure the company names match. So let's take a look and see what that might look like. I'm going to jump into my environment here. I've got a login. So let's go ahead and do that. I've got my little tenant here that I can use. And this happens every time I have to go back and it'll let me do it this time. It always times out when I'm sitting on that page long enough. Okay, so here's the environment I'm going to be doing the importing into. You can see that I already have a lot of categories. And what I'm going to be using as my example here is home appliances like microwaves and refrigerators and dishwashers and things like that. But before I want to import my products and attributes, I want to import some users. And in this case, they don't necessarily have to be customers. They can be partners, right? They can be vendors. They can be internal salespeople, but they still have to have a company to go along with them. So my first step is always to go into setup. So setup nowadays, we had our user interface changed just recently. So the setup is over here on the left-hand side. You just click on those little gears and then click setup. And all of our user information, our companies and our users are down here under users. So here's our users menu. Here's our company's submenu. Here's our users submenu. So I'm going to start by going here to companies. And you can see that over here, we don't really have the ability to do an import-export, but in some interfaces we do. What we want to do, though, is we're going to do our import-export from another section rather than kind of sifting through here and seeing, well, okay, I can import users, but I can't import companies. It seems kind of, a little bit hard to find things. The easiest thing to do is just collapse all this, go down to the very bottom. There's an import-export section down there. So if you click on the import-export menu, you'll see that there are submenus for all the different types of data you can import. So here's customers, here's companies, here's users, and so on. So if I go down here to companies, export, import, you can see that my first option is that I can simply choose to export. Now if I choose export, I'll go ahead and click on it, give it a second to think. All it's going to do here is just export all my companies, but it's not creating a template. So if I just open this, for example, in Excel, These are the companies that I have in my system right now: GMS, Webcom, Supertech, and so on. So it just took my list of companies and exported them. But I'm going to leave this open because I want to show you the difference between that and downloading a template. So downloading a template is the way that you would create your template that you would use to bring your companies in. So if I click on download template and open this one's going to look a bit different. It looks more or less the same, but there are a few differences. One is that you'll notice that there's a member ID column at the beginning of the export one, whereas the template doesn't have anything like that. It just starts with the company name, address, and so on. It also is just populating the spreadsheet with some dummy data, right? It's just there as sort of sample data that you can use. And I want to talk a little bit about this one, but the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to close all these. I have an existing file that I'm going to import. Let's look at that one instead. So let's close all this. Okay, so you got an idea now of what that all looks like. My existing file is, let's see, companies import example right here. Okay, so these are the files I'm actually going to import. So what I want to show you here is that we have two tabs at the bottom, right? We have the companies themselves. This is the list of companies I want to import. And then over here, there's another tab called Important Info. And Important Info is really just telling you what it is that you are supposed to do with the data, including whether or not the field is required, whether there are any restrictions. In this case, the slash doesn't really mean anything other than no, there aren't. So you can see the company name is required, address 1, city, zip is not required. But one thing that's kind of interesting here. Okay, so first of all, the country is required, right? So if I jump back over here to the companies tab, you'll see that everybody has a company, or a country rather, sorry. But the state, let me jump back over to Important Info. The state is only required. Oh, hold on, let's see if I can get that a little bit quiet. Sometimes we have people jump on and it gets kind of loud. There, that's better. The state is only required if the country is the United States or Canada. Now, of course, most other countries have either states, provinces, counties, or protectorates, whatever they might be called. You can still put something in. It's just that we only enforce it if the country is the US or Canada. So if you jump back over here to companies, you'll see that for the two that are not in the US, the ones in India and Germany, we have a city, but I've left the state blank. If I wanted to, I could populate them, but in this case, I don't really need to. So just kind of looking down, you can see that a few other things. The company code is required. The system ID is required, but you can't have more than one company with the same ID. It's mostly just used for matching, right? And so that's kind of the general idea here. So that's an idea of what the templates might look like, right? So as I go through here, of course, we're going to be looking at a lot of templates. I won't necessarily go through all of these unless there's something in particular that I feel is really good to know. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Okay, and now if you want to see what doing an import looks like, I can just use the file picker here. So I'll select the file. Let's go back up, and I'm going to go to that same file that we were just looking at, which was this one right here, companies import example. We're going to open it, and then I just click on Apply Template. This is very straightforward. Okay. So it says they're imported, and if you want to check that, you can go back up to the Users menu, and let's go down here to Companies. And just to give you an idea, by the way, it's these first four: the Home Guys, XYZ Distributors, ABC Builders, and Appliances Unlimited. So it looks like they all got imported, and all of the information along with them. So we are in good shape. Okay, so that's the first type of import I wanted to show you. Now, we won't necessarily go through all of these, but I do want to show you users. So let's jump back down to Import Export again. And once again, with this one, let me jump back over to that list of import files. And you can see an example here of the user's import. So the difference here is that the company is just the company itself. The user is the person who logs in, right? So when you're setting up a user, you want to do things like, you give them a username, either a password or some sort of password rules. And you can also indicate the company that they're with, but they may not necessarily have the same country, city, and so on. So a couple of things I want to point out about the users. First of all, of course, again, we have the important info tab, which will have all of these rules on it. Oh, let me jump back over to users again. The first one is, you'll notice that I took a little bit of a shortcut with the password here and just gave everybody the same fairly easy to guess password. Over on the right-hand side, there's an area, I'll just scroll over here a little bit so you can see it. There's an area where you can say that when this person logs in for the first time, they have to change their password. So that will enforce the password security. What most organizations will do here, if they're importing users using this method, which not everybody does, what they might do is they might have a unique password generator. So everybody would actually have a more random password that is unique all the way down the list. But what will happen to the user is they'll get an email saying, you have a new user account, your username is C. Jameson, click here. It takes you to a page that says, all right, you have to change your password. And then they give it their own. So the pass 1, 2, 3 is gone by that time. Couple of other things I want to point out here. You'll notice that these all have a user type of customer. If you've been through the intro class, the e-learning, you know that the user type is a required field and it is set up ahead of time. So it's going to look for a user type called customer. If that doesn't exist, it will kick back an error. So you want to make sure that it is consistent. Okay. Email here, you've got to have email or the user won't get the email saying that they have a new account. They won't have a way to get in. And going a little bit further over to the right here, okay, there's the company. It's just, looks like I have a misspelling there. Actually, I have a couple of misspellings. There we go. So we'll just change those. Okay. The other thing I wanted to point out is a bit further on. So there's must change password, whether the password is locked. 0 means it's unlocked. Let's see. We have a place where you can put in the approval, the managing the ordering parent, whether or not it's active. And then a little further on, you'll notice that there's a section called time zone. And the question is, what do you put for the time zone? Well, the time zone is, we actually have a list of time zones in this this last tab down here. So if I click on time zones, you'll see that I have a list of all the possible time zones. For example, I'm in California, so I'm on Pacific Standard Time. So if that were the case, then I would choose this time zone, the one here at number 11, and just make sure that whatever is in the time zone column is an exact match. I have noticed there's a really common mistake that people make, and it's very easy to do and very easy to fix. And that is, if you go to the time zone tab, I've noticed that a lot of the time people will put that second value in instead, the UTC minus 800. That's really more of a description. It's not the actual ID. What you want to put in is the ID. If you put in the description, you will get a mismatch error. And again, you're going to get an error when you're doing the import. So just make sure you're using the ID and not the description. So let's go ahead and zoom over here, see if there's anything else. Discount level is just a custom field, so I don't really care about that. So other than that, I think I'm going to go ahead and close this, save those changes, and let's go ahead and do the import. So going back here to import export, I'm going to go down to user import. Now this one's going to look a little different. This is a user interface that is closer to our legacy user interface. This is actually going to eventually look like the company's import that we just did, or company's import. This is where you would download a template. You can also create a template by exporting users. Step 2 is simply saying populate the template. We've already done that. We already have our data. And then we have select and upload the file with your user data. So that just means here I'm going to browse, and I'm going to select that file, which is this one right here, and say open. Okay, now when I do an import, I want to show you another very common thing that I see happen. So I'm going to click on import. Now this is the legacy import. And it actually is a kind of nice because it actually shows us a little bit more information. But what you'll see here is that it tells me the Excel file has been successfully processed, right? 4 records, right? My 4 new users, none invalid. At this point, the data has not actually been imported. It has only been validated and matched. Hasn't actually been imported yet. At this point, I have 3 choices. I can either import just straight, don't worry about previewing. I can choose to import with a preview, or I can import with a preview of invalid records only. In this case, let's see what import with preview looks like. So click on that. And you can see here a preview of my 4 records, which look great. Beautiful. Okay, I can go over here and see everything that's on there. There are my time zones. And to actually conduct the import, click the Save button. And now I'm done. So if you want to check those, you can go back to the users, click on the users submenu, and there are my 4 users, James, Julia, Taylor, and Carter, and their companies, as well as email and so on. Now, all of these emails, of course, are fictional, so they're not going anywhere, but if these had been real users, I would have each one of them would have received an email telling them that they have a new CPQ account and guiding them toward resetting their password. So those are a couple of examples of pretty straightforward imports. So let me stop there for just a moment before I move on to attributes and products. Does anybody have any questions? Not seeing any so far. I'll give you a moment to, in case anybody wants to type anything in the chat window, and then we'll move on. Okay. As we move on, and I know I say this a lot, but I want to make sure you are, you know that if it looks like I am moving on from a question you may have asked, do go ahead and put it in the chat window. I will stop as I'm going through this next topic and just make sure that everybody's questions are being addressed. So I don't want you to feel rushed in typing in your questions. That said, let's go ahead and jump into the next topic, which is importing attribute data and product data. And we're going to start with attributes and attribute translations. So if you've been through at least part of the e-learning, you know that an attribute is sort of like it's any type of an option for a product. Usually they're used in configurable products, but the idea is that when you want to have information about a product in a catalog, whether it can be selected by the user or not, that would be considered an attribute. So sometimes we call them building blocks. The example that we're going to be looking at as we import our attributes is a microwave oven, and in particular a set of attributes. So we mentioned the carousel tray, right? That little tray that rotates around inside your microwave to make sure your food cooks evenly. But microwaves could have lots of other attributes too, right? The capacity, the type of oven, whether it's built-in or it's over the counter or under the counter, or if it's just a countertop microwave, right? Those can all be attributes. And maybe we'll also do the color, right? Do we want black, white, stainless steel, or what have you? Now, I mentioned here multiple languages are supported because one of the things I want to show you as we go through this is importing translations. So I'll show you how that's done as we go as well. So let's start by just looking at importing attributes. So first of all, let me jump back over here to my environment. And if you want to see where attributes are, okay, we'll see here, if you go under the product catalog, there are the products, here are the attributes. So big question here is, why are we dealing with attributes before products? Well, again, because the attributes are the building blocks for the products, if you want to import the attributes first and then import the products so that it finds the attributes it needs. So here's my list of attributes right now. I have a very large number of them for a lot of different types of products. You can see I actually have a total of 154. But what I want to do is import attributes for a microwave oven. So once again, if you want to import or export, and I won't do an export this time because I think it's about the same, but I'm going to go down to import export. I'm going to go back down to my attribute import. And once again, you can see that we have a place where you can download a sample template or create a template by exporting data. Then you populate it and then you select and upload it. So let's take a look at the file that I have preset with all of our import data. So let's see, there's our attributes import. Okay. Now what you'll see here is that I have two columns. Let me widen this one so you can see what it says. Two columns that you're not really going to do anything with. First of all, there's a system ID column that you don't want to modify. If you have exported data and you're turning around and importing some updates, that system ID will be populated. But if you're importing new data, you want to leave that blank. The index, just start with 1 and then increment by 1. So you can see here I have 10 different values, so I just have 1 through 10. Then let's make this a little narrower so you can see it. Then we have the name of the attribute and any possible display values, as well as the actual values and the data type. So looking at the tray here, for example, you can see that I have 2 entries with the attribute of tray right here. And the reason is because there are 2 possible values, carousel tray or standard tray. So basically what I do is I put 1 on each row. The display value and the value can be different, but they are both required. And the data type has to be both required and it has to match one of the existing data types. To make that a little bit easier to find, we do have a list of data types down here on this next tab. So user selection is a good one if you're just not really sure what you want. That means there's a list and the user gets to pick them either using a drop-down menu or a checkbox or something like that. Once again, we have an important info tab that tells me what is required and what the restrictions are, as well as the maximum file size. So this is just saying that regardless of how many attributes you're importing, the file size can't be more than 768 kilobytes, which is going to be a lot because, as you can see, we don't have a lot of columns here. Okay, so importing this, let's go ahead and just close that window. I'll save that, whatever changes I made. And once again, this is going to look exactly the same as the user import. I browse to that file, I select it, I choose open. Okay, once again, when I choose import, I'm not actually doing the import because it's going to take me to that page. Give me just a moment here. Okay, so again, it's been successfully processed, but hasn't been imported yet, right? It's just checking the valid records. And once again, let's do an import with preview. And there's my preview. And while we're doing this, we had a good question come in the chat. Let's make sure I didn't miss any. Okay, so the question is, does the customer import template look the same, including the important info? Does the customer import template look the same as the user template? I mean, including important info. So it looks like we really is kind of two questions here. I think the question is, which one does it look like? Does it look like the user's one or the attributes one? Let me show you. I do have a customer import one. I didn't do this one only because it's really about the same, but here's an example of one. So so you have companies and customers, and they are different, right? Because a company can be a customer, but it doesn't have to be. Right, so this will be an example of a customer's one. So the only difference with this one is that it doesn't have an important info tab. It just has the system ID, which the rules are the same here. The system ID is blank. Index starts from 1 and increments in 1. And then if you kind of go across here, you can see that we have more or less the same fields as companies, but it is a little bit different. in general with this one, and I'm not sure why it doesn't have an important info tab, but what you can do with the customers import is just use the same rules you use for users. So leave the system ID blank, start the index from 1, increment in 1. The country is required. The state is only required if the country is US or Canada, and so on. So I know it is a little bit different, but in general, it's about the same. Does that help? I should say, is that what you were asking? Okay, we'll see what happens with that. I'll go ahead and leave that one open in the meantime. So what we were looking at was importing. In the meantime, we were looking at importing the attributes. So you can see here that it's given me a list of attributes. So let's go ahead and save this. So that's actually going to do the import. And if you want to see what that looks like now, you can go back to the product catalog. You can go to attributes, and let's just find one of these. We'll find color. Okay. The color was one of them, the color of the microwave. So there it is. Looks like it was imported today, March 6th. And if I edit it, you'll see that it also pulled in those attribute values that we were looking at. So keep an eye, by the way, on that system ID. That's going to be important here in just a moment. But for now, I just wanted you to see that we are good. So the follow-up to that question was yes, but it'll be good to have important info here. Yes, this is part of the question. It'll be good to have important info here to know which fields are required, etc. You know what? You are absolutely right, and I'm not sure why the company info doesn't have that important info tab. But yeah, for some reason it doesn't. It just sort of goes along with the same rules as users. So, good question, though. I'm glad you asked that. Okay, so that was importing the attributes. So I'm actually going to come back and talk about translations after we import the product. So before we move on to the product import, does anybody have any questions? Any other questions so far? Okay. Jump back over here to my slides. Okay. So importing products is a big one because not only do we generally work with catalogs that have a very large number of products with a lot of different categories, but they tend to change a lot, right? The pricing might change, the pricing model might change, the name of the products, part numbers, the way they're categorized. So being able to add large numbers of products as well as update large numbers of products is pretty important in CPQ. So you can import products either as simple or configurable products. There are, again, in this case, the template has 2 sheets. In this case, for whatever reason, the sheet with the information is called specification rather than important info, but it's the same thing. And once again, we have that support for multiple languages, so I'm going to show you how we do a translation after we get the products imported. So what we'll do here, oh, sorry, very important, one other point. Importing products and their categories. Now again, if you've been through the intro class, you know that the category is a required field in a product. Right? You can't import a product without a category. However, if you do import a product and a category that has a category that doesn't exist, the system will automatically create it. What that means is, if what you really want to do is assign a product to a subcategory, how do you do it? And the answer is you separate the category and the subcategory with a greater than sign, right? A sideways, a right pointing caret. So for example, if I am importing dishwashers and they go under an appliances category and a subcategory of dishwasher, I want to just say, I want to put appliances greater than dishwasher. And you can keep on adding subcategory levels under dishwasher if you want to, but that's the way you want to do it. If you didn't do it this way and you simply said that I want to add it to the dishwasher category, it would automatically create a new category called dishwasher on the top level, and that may not be what you want. So products, let's take a look. All right, so I'm going to jump over here to my products workspace. We have two different products workspaces. In the past, we've been using products. I'm going to look at products 2.0 here. This is what our new user interface for products is going to be like. It's much nicer, a little bit more consistent with the rest of the user interface. So here are all of our different products. And you'll notice that if I just go in, I'm just going to pick one here at random. Let's choose this one right here. You'll notice that every product has a category field, which is required, and it also has a product type field up here, which is also required. So we need our products to include both of those. So our product type will be appliances, our category will be appliances, and then maybe some of them might have subcategories. Right? So once again, the actual import is done down here under Import Export. Here's our product import down here. And once again, you can see that our the user interface is the legacy one, which is again gives us a lot of detail, but it's just walking you through the details. First of all, you can download some sample products. You can export. You can create a template by exporting selected products, which is a nice way of saying I want to take all the products in a particular category and update them and then turn around and import them again. Or you can export all your products, or you can just do a search for the products you want to export. And then you populate the template with your data. Now this third step is kind of an interesting one, which is when you're importing products, you have the ability to either choose none on step 3, which means it's always going to create a new product, or you can choose how you want to match. Now, why do we not want to always match by part number? Because not everybody uses part numbers, and a lot of organizations have dynamic part numbers. So you're rarely going to have two products that have the same part number in a case like that. You could use the product name. You can use an external ID or a UPC or an MPN. Those are all, well, product name is required, but all the next 3 are optional fields that some organizations use and some don't. You can use the CPQ ID, which is always going to be unique and is assigned by the system. Or you can use a product family code. So this gives you a lot of different choices. There's not really a way to customize it, but a lot of organizations use the 3 fields here, the external ID, the UPC, and the manufacturer part number in different ways. So you can match it any way you want. Now, in our case, we're going to make it very simple because we are creating brand new products. We are not matching them at all. So I'm going to choose none. Now, let's take a look at the file at the products I'm going to import. Let's go back to Import Export. I'm going to go to my products import right here. Okay, so here are my actual products, right? So you can see here I have a television, an air conditioner, a refrigerator, dishwasher, and so on. So, and the one here that is the exception is the dishwasher, which they all have a product type of appliance. But if you scroll over here to the right, you'll see that this one has a subcategory, right? Dishwashers. Also, let's scroll over a little bit further here, going up one to that microwave oven. Okay, we have user can enter quantity. We can also add our attributes as we go. This may be a little more complicated than we need to go through here. But one thing I do want to point out is that there is a column here called Configurable. And you'll notice that all of these have this set to 0 except the microwave. And that's basically saying that when I import the microwave, it will import as a configurable product and not as a simple product. The rest of them are just simple products. The other thing I want to point out about the product import template is on the specification tab, there are a lot of fields that are not included in the template by default, but that you can add. One of these, for example, is a field called delete. you can just manually add a column called delete. And if you populate that field with number 1, then instead of importing that product, it looks for a product match and deletes it. We're actually going to do this in a later class, so I won't actually demo that this time. But I wanted to show you that that there are things that you can do with product imports that don't show up on that first tab. Just go to specification to find out how it's done. All right, so let's go ahead and import these products. So let me close that. Okay, and I'm going to browse to that file. So go to Browse. We're going to go to Products Import. We're going to go to Open. Once again, we're going to choose Import. And once again, it's going to take me to an option where I can either preview it or just do a straight import. Okay, looks like we have 6 records, none invalid. That looks good. Let's do an import with preview. All right, this looks very good. You can see here that it recognizes that this is new rather than a match. Okay, there are all my products. Let's go ahead and hit save. Okay, and now we're done. Let's go ahead and go to the products page. This, by the way, this link is just a shortcut. It's exactly the same as going back over to product catalog and selecting products. And a quick way for me to see whether or not those products all imported properly is to filter my products to show only ones that are appliances. So I'm going to click on Choose Categories. Okay, you'll see here that it created an appliances category. I didn't really point this out, but it wasn't there before. We'll go ahead and select both appliances and the dishwasher subcategory. So we'll update that. Okay, and there they are. And what you'll notice is that the microwave is a configurable product as opposed to all the others. And the dishwasher is, and you can't really see it here unless I go in and edit it, but the dishwasher is not, well, it is actually. It's under the dishwashers category rather than the appliances category. Okay, so does anybody have any questions so far? Pretty straightforward. Okay, I want to spend a moment talking about, let's see, yep. Okay, I want to spend a moment talking about translations. So when you're importing products or attributes, one thing that you can do is you can import translations. This is a very, very nice feature because CPQ is a product that is very, it is used by a lot of organizations that do a lot of localization. But the problem that you run into when you are in the catalog is you don't want to just rely on the system to translate the names of your products or your descriptions. You have to be very careful about your branding. We did have a question come in the chat. What does the quote description mean in the Excel template? And where will we see it on the product? Oh, okay, that's a good question. So what you're talking about there, let me jump over back to that template again. All right, so we have the description and then we have the quote description. And you'll notice that in many cases they could be the same. What this means, let me go ahead and just jump into, let's use the microwave here as an example. Okay, so there we go. So we have the product description. So we have the product name, and then we have the product description, and then we have, I believe the quote description is under additional data. Yeah, it's actually the long product. No, that's the long product description. Where is the quote description? I don't know if it's, now that I think about it, I think it may not be used anymore, that we use the dynamic description instead. But it shows up, it's the one that appears in the actual quote itself, which generally means that it's going to be a lot longer and a lot more detailed, because it's what actually shows up, like, okay, I'm handing you my quote, might even be printed out, right, at least as a PDF file, so it's going to have a lot of detail on it. The next question is, could we do a mass delete of products just by adding the column delete for our template? Yes, and then the other thing you do is enter the value 1 in the delete column, and so it's a 2-step process. Okay, translations. So we were talking about translations and how, and if I jump back out here to the catalog, you can kind of see what I mean, right? If I go in here to my appliances right now, so let's say, for example, that I have my microwave, which is configurable, and here's my description, and maybe I might have some other information if I bring this up, and I can see my, well, I don't have the attributes in there yet because I didn't add them, but I don't want to just rely on the system to translate them. I want them to be, I want my branding department to determine what the name of it should be. And I might even have different values, right? So an example of this, an example of this would be, let's say for the microwave, let me just jump back over here to the setup, is, let's go back down here to our attributes, okay, is the color. So let's say for, in this case, that we sell our microwaves. Let's say, for example, we sell them in the United States and Canada, so we also want to translate the product name and the colors into French. So the way I would go about doing this is I start by importing my attributes using my master language, which in this case would be English. And I export the attributes. So here's what it would look like. So I'm going to go ahead and just collapse that catalog. I'm going to go down to import export. And I'm going to go down here to my attributes, but this time I'm going to choose the attribute translations export import. So I'm going to choose attribute translations. Now this time I do have to export my template because I have to get the system ID to match with what is already in the system. So what I can do here is, first of all, if I don't want to export all of my attributes, I can filter it. Like in this case, I know my attribute name is color, so I'm just going to select by attribute name. I'm just going to filter it by the attribute name of color. And then I choose the languages I want to translate it to. Now in this case, I'm going to see all the languages for dictionaries that I have set up in my particular instance, which in this case includes Japanese, Spanish, French, Italian, and so on. I only want to choose French, right? And then I export the attributes translation. Okay, so we'll go ahead and export that. I'll open it in Excel and save a copy. So let's go ahead and say open. I'll enable editing, and let's just save this. I'm just going to save it to my desktop. So I'll just say save as, put it up on the desktop. Where's my desktop? There it is. Okay, so, and we'll call this French translation attributes. Okay, so we'll say save. And now I have two tabs and I need to populate both of these. First of all, I don't need this one. I don't need this one called unit color. That one's not the one I want to translate. So I'm just going to delete that. So we'll just delete that column. And what I'm going to do is I'm first going to translate the name of the attribute into French. So, right, so this is what French-speaking people will see instead of the word color. Then I go down and translate the values. So I'm going to go to attribute values translations. And let's say in this case that I don't again, I don't want these ones that are 2 through 10. That's that other color. That's the unit color. So I'll delete those. I'm only interested in the microwave color. And here I'm going to choose to translate black into noir and white into blanc. Okay? So what I've done is I've translated the name of the attribute as well as the actual values, and then I just save this. And you'll notice here, here's what's important here is notice I have this attribute ID, color 10, CPQ, and an attribute value ID, black color, white color, and some much longer value. This is what the system is going to use to do a match, so it's important that I export the data and translate it and then import it back in. So the way I would import it back in, let's just close this, okay, is I go back now to step 3. I choose to upload the file. So I'll select the file, go back to my desktop where I saved that file, which is right, let's see, French translation attributes right here, and apply the template. Okay, and it's now successfully imported. Now the question might be, how do you really know? It's a little bit easier to see when you are using the system, well, when you're in user view. So let's go ahead and exit setup, and I might be able to show you this. Let's take a look. So the first thing is that if I change my my language from English to French, I can just do that as a user by going to my user page. And I go down here to the dictionary. Whoop, where's my cursor? There it is. Okay. And I change it to French and hit save. Now, if I go back to the catalog at this point, you'll see that everything is still in English, right? Because I haven't translated any of my categories yet. But I will go to, where are my appliances? Are my appliances? Okay. And you can see that it did translate some things, but it didn't try to translate the actual appliances themselves. Now, in this case, I think configure won't work because I didn't add it. So let me show you this a different way. I'm going to change it back to English, US English, and back into setup. So I think the other thing I can do is I can go to the catalog, go down to the product, and I can change select language into French. And then what would happen is if I were now looking at the microwave and I look at the attributes, I would be able to see them in French instead of in English. So let's go back to attributes and let's go to the color. And what I would see here is instead of seeing black and white, I would see black and white in French, noir and blanc. The products are the same way, are done the same way. I can demo it for you if you want, but because we only have a couple of minutes left, I have one other topic I want to talk about. But before we do, we had another question in the chat. We're going back to product import here. We were talking earlier about customizing a product and or a product import. The question is, what should we put in the column tray for a configurable product if we add a new one by this template? So let me show you really quickly. Jump back over to my products import. So the question there would be, let me go back over here to specification. So if I wanted to make this a configurable product and it was a brand new one, you can see that there is a possible column called configurable, and you just flag it as either 0 or 1. And you can see an example of that in the products tab, where I have here the microwave is a configurable product. So if I scroll over a bit to the right, you'll see that I have a column called configurable with the same name. And in here, the microwave has a value of 1, and all the others are simple products, so they all have a value of 0. Is that what you were asking? Does that help? Okay. All right, keep those questions coming. As you do, let me jump over. I've got one other thing I want to show you, one other thing I want to talk about, and that is bulk import, bulk export. Okay. Bulk import is a very, very nice way to be able to import data, and I'll show it to you here. The reason we didn't cover it earlier is because right now it only works for 2 different types of data, for products and users. But the advantage of the bulk import is that it runs in the background, so you're not sitting waiting for data to get imported. If you're importing a very large amount of data, like thousands of records, you're not sitting there waiting for it to count through. You just kind of leave it and go back to your day. And if it looks like it's going to take a very long time, you can set it to email you a notification when the import is done. So doing a bulk import, let's jump back over to the environment here. I have another piece of sample data. Let me go back down here to import export, and you'll see that bulk import export is up here at the top. Okay, so first of all, again, you can see here we only have products and users, so we'll have others coming later. I have an example here of a bulk import. It is, let's see, this one right here. So we have some other products, right? So these are smart TVs. I've already created this one using the template. And importing this is as simple as just doing a drag and drop. So I'm going to move that off to the side here. And you can see over here I have import products. Just like with the other type of product import, I can still choose to choose a product identifier, or I can choose none if the product is always created, and whether or not I want to be emailed when it's done. So if I now go back to that file, actually let me move it over here, I can just drag and drop it right on top of that importer. Give it a second. There we go. So it's queued up. If I want it to email me, I can just check that little box. It actually wouldn't email me because I'm logged in as portal admin, so it doesn't have my email. And it's pretty quick in this case, especially since I'm only importing 3 products, but you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. Okay, there it is. It's done. So now it's, if I want to see what it looks like, I can click on Finish. It'll just show me. This is just a download, a status download. It's not actually a list of the kind of what happened. So this way, if I have an error, I'll see it here in the status column at the very end. So if anything goes wrong, I know which ones to fix and try to import them again. Okay, but if I just want to see those records now, I can go back to the product catalog, back to products, and those products were, I believe those were electronics, so let's go ahead and filter that for electronics. And these are the 3 I just imported, the 48, 52, and 65-inch smart TV. So really it's the same as any other import. So just to summarize that, let me jump back over to the slides again.